Crystal, for the introduction and for the invitation. It's for me a great pleasure to be here for the first time in Santiago, and I'm very excited. So it's a pleasure to be in the Pontifical Universidad. I don't speak Spanish, I can understand, so I will talk in English, sorry for that. Let's see if this works. Yes, I can. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce our research lab, and I'm going to introduce projects that we are doing, both in order to show method and approaches, but also in order to show how do we think technologies and how do we try to play with the way we can connect people, information, and places. And actually, if we have a research focus in our lab, I would say that we try to creatively design technologies and experiences to connect people, information, and places. And when I say people, it is both from the individual user, small groups, to large communities. Information is both how people communicate, but also the information communication technologies. And the third element, the space, is both the built environment, but also the digital architecture. So we're really trying to approach and to explore connectivity and to design connection among these three spaces. And actually the very good lecture before by Daniel addresses a very interesting point about the area of emotional design and the experience of designing tools. So, let's see. Our research lab covered different topics, and connectivity, mobility, and sustainability. Connectivity, I will show some examples. For example, we design explore technologies for mobile phone and near-field communications, or we work with trade shows. Mobility, I will also show some projects, how to improve transportation, for example, how to improve public transportation systems. And finally, sustainability, we have a lot of projects, and I will show one in particular where we are building a sustainable house. So let me give you, first of all, 5 keywords that are very important to us and to my group, and that illustrate how we work. So first of all, this notion of pluridisciplinarity. As Cristobal said in the introduction, I've done my PhD in social science, but I'm working in a very highly technological and advanced place such as MIT. And in my research group, we have architects, electrical engineers, computer science, mechanical engineers, sociologists, interaction designer, and we all work together. And really to understand the complex issues and problems nowadays, it's really important to have different teams, or actually different people with different skills that work together. This is one of the first workshops that we did, and you can see Bill Mitchell in the picture. And we actually started to redesign a car. And you can see we started to redesign a car having architects designing a car with an architectural approach. So when you have architects thinking how to build a car, you start to build scenarios and open perspective, and you have 10 different scenarios and hypotheses, and then you have engineers that they want to have one problem to solve, to focus, and so far. So there is a little bit of tension, but then the synergy between the two is very important. Second element is this notion of multiculturalism. I'm Italian, and actually in this picture you see Sergio Ryan was one of my assistants. He's now dealing in the university here in Santiago. You have many folks actually from the design applications, a worker from Turkey. We have a native from Israel, a student from the United States. So basically in my group, we have students that come from many different places. So the cultural background that students bring into project is really important. Being able to understand the complexity from different perspectives is really key. So for example, when we started to design a kitchen, to reimagine a kitchen, and we have one Italian discussing with one American, with one Asian, and one Indian on the cultural value of the kitchen, of course we have like totally different perspectives. But this enrich our process and our projects. Hands-on, like MIT, really the important things at the MIT is to create artifacts, to create objects that illustrate the project and the education that the students go through. So, as you know, the MIT Media Lab was founded 25 years ago by three great men. One is Nicolas Negroponte, who was a fantastic visionary, expert in technologies and business. One was Marvin Minsky, among the fathers of artificial intelligence. And finally, Seymour Papert, who studies with Jean Piaget in Switzerland and brought back this notion of active learning, transforming this into the idea of constructivism, so building by doing, so the importance of creating objects. And actually one of the motto of the MIT is mens and manus. In the Media Lab is a little bit more radical, is demo or die. But the notion is really, you have to show your own ideas and learn. And this notion of creating artifacts, put it out there, discuss, improve the design, and this is where the learning process. The first keywords for us is we have a lot of private sponsors, which is a particular way to work with, but working with private sponsors, some of the design brief or the problem that we receive are really grounded into real problems. And we have this back and forth between research and R&D department from companies, so there is a synergy between the two. And actually this ties from Daniel's lecture, so this notion of disruptive user. You can design something that is perfect, like a bicycle, but then when you start to look what people does with perfect tools, you're really surprised. So this notion of being able to integrate the user perspective, so this is what we call co-design or user-centered design, so involving users into the design and into the processes. And the notion is very simple, is that users, the imagination of users is always greater than your imagination. So in a way you design something, but then how people really use things is really surprising. So again, this notion, this is like all the picture found on the internet, but really the message is having the user in the center of the attention of the design. And then they will always surprise you. So these are the 5 keywords that are very important to us, and then somehow illustrate our work. Now when we go through few projects, again to illustrate how we do things and how we approach things. The first 3 projects involve a lot of physical construction, and the other are more related to mobile media and technologies. As I mentioned, I will start with this project that is the Connected Sustainable House. And this is a view from above of a small village in Italy, northern part of Italy. The village is called Zambana. I've lived in Italy for a long time, but I didn't know that this existed till when I went to the MIT. So this village has been destroyed by a landslide in 1950. And they built this U-shape that you see is a wall. And they have built a wall to protect the village from other natural catastrophes. So when we started to talk to the local government, they asked us how can we redesign Green Village. So they asked us to propose an approach. And we started actually to rethink first the urban planning, but then we dive into the design of one unique house. And we have 4 main approaches for the house. So if we need to reinvent the home of the future, which I don't like the term home of the future, but if we need to invent a connected, sustainable house, we have four main approaches. One is sustainable architecture, which basically is the use of sustainable material, but also integrated aesthetically into the landscape of the local culture and the local village. Secondly, we started to rethink smart energy systems. So how can we use a renewable energy system to power the house? Three is how can we explore information and communication technologies in a new way? And finally, this notion of social sustainability acknowledges that the house is built into a local territory with a local culture, economy, social structure. So, and the four elements somehow need to play together. So this was our starting point. And what we started is, this is very, say, MIT, but what we started to address, we have two main points. One is robotic and cognitive architecture. So we wanted to design a house that was really able to respond to the user, to the environment, and have an automatic behavior in order to optimize the energy consumption, the energy production, the energy distribution, and so forth. So merging this notion of cognitive architecture. The thing today, when you enter in the hotel, you have like automatic doors that open. So there is a kind of automatic system that recognizes that you're entering. But if you stay outside and you smoke a cigarette, the door doesn't recognize and it open and close it. And the notion is a very simple example, but the notion is how you can design a house that actually understands if you need to enter or if you're just taking a pause and you're outside, so it doesn't need to open and close. So very simple example, but we wanted to explore this area. And then robotic is how can we push the boundaries and the frontier of robotic architecture. So having an architecture that somehow work robotically in symbiotically actually with the user and with the environment. One of the system, and this is the dynamic facade that we have built, is basically the dynamic windows that open and close and manage the energy entrance and consumption within the house. So we have a house that is both made out of a passive envelope on the back, but a very active facade in the front. So we merged three different types of technologies for the windows. The window can turn opaque and transparent based on the privacy issues, but also the windows can change color. We have electrochromic glasses, and finally they can open and close. So this element is totally automatic, and again is supposed to manage the energy. And then we are working with a research lab in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence department at the MIT, and we apply the same software basically that we use for airplanes to optimize routes and to optimize the risk management. So for example, airplanes, they know how much gas they have from going from one point to another, and they create a route. But then if there is a storm, they have to deviate. So they have to calculate the risk, how much they one element of the house. And we start to build, this is a view from internal, how we're building nowadays the facade. The second notion, so one big area is cognitive and robotic architecture. And the second notion is this idea of house as a personal trainer, which basically means we don't want to, we need to, in a way, imagine a house that creates a partnership with the users in order to educate the user to have a sustainable behavior. So we can push and have a totally automatic and robotic house, furnished with latest software, but at the same time, the education of those who live in the house is critical. So we are trying to merge these two elements. So this notion of house as a personal trainer, which is not a very nice metaphor, but it is basically between the house and the user, you have to establish a synergistic behavior so you can have a sustainable use of energy and resources. So we started to explore like a smart plug or energy system that interact with users and provide feedback on their energy consumption. We started to prototype paper toys or toys. For example, if we need to redesign the room for the children, we need to educate kids to turn off the lights, to don't use too much water and so far. So we design toys made out of paper that have some sensor capabilities and they can basically interact and provide feedback and so forth. And this is like the latest pictures that we are actually visiting the house, and we are, this is like northern Italy, Trento, the house is basically built. We are finishing to build the software, and in a couple of months we will start to do testing and see how we can renew it. So you saw from the initial point with design brief and ideas, and then we went to a physical construction, and now we use the house as a platform to explore ideas and technologies. So another project that illustrates, totally different, but illustrates how we can merge information communication technologies and physical construction is a bus stop. And we work with the French Paris transportation system. This is an old project, but there are a lot of interesting elements. We work with the erratic objects. So this is one of the first attempts to build the house, the bus stop. And basically we wanted to explore parametric design, which actually Daniel is an expert. So parametric design, in this case, is how you can give some parameters to a shape and then establish variations. It's very much inspired by Noam Chomsky universal grammar theory in the language. But basically, if you need to design a bus stop for the Champs-Élysées, it should be a very long and big one. But if you need to design a bus stop for a small neighborhood, it can be like a small one, but they all need to share the same language, the same design, the same aspect. So you can utilize computers to create variation and to explore forms and variations, but they can have a unique language. So we explored to build. So this was part of our exercise to build the bus stop, and then we used like more than 700 pieces of plywood, and we utilized our internal Fab Labs to cut the plywood and to build it. So we built the bus stop, and we explored in this case how we can redesign the architectural form. Second element, we wanted to create some interactivity. So we didn't want to put the bus stop on an interactive TV screen. So we explore, in this case, silicon and LEDs in order to create an interactive surface, but also we wanted to explore a curved surface. So the tiles on the top, you see that they are cut into two pieces, so you can bend and create a curved screen. And then we managed to build everything from assembling to creating the hardware, the software, to putting like LEDs. I don't remember how many LEDs the students put manually. One of the big interesting things for MIT is that students, they don't know what they should not do it. So they always overcommit, and they also want to explore a lot of interesting things. So this is great. And in this case, they propose, I don't know how many thousands of LEDs that they put manually. So anyway, this was the reactive stream. Let's see. This is that we shipped the bus stop to Paris and we exhibited in Paris. But let me show there is I think is a video that shows the concept. And the main idea of the bus stop was to have a bus stop as interactive landmark with user-generated content. So a bus stop where people not only go to take a bus and to leave from, but a bus stop where people go and to interact with information. So to create a dense space of the city. And in the bus stop you have two interaction sites, internally and externally. So the interaction internally is basically where people can have access to information, and we utilize the metaphor of urban garden. So you will see that think to a location-based discussion. So think to an internet discussion on a forum on internet. You have a topic, a title, and then you have a conversation. For us, we utilize basically the urban metaphor where each tree is a discussion thread and each message is a lead. So when you want to explore, for example, if you want to post something and to search for a babysitter, or you want to download music, or you want to search for jobs, or you want to sell your user cards, basically you click on different trees and you post messages, and each message is a lead. So basically the idea, and then of course you have like mobile interaction to upload or download content and so forth. And the metaphor of the urban garden for us was the more the people communicate at the local level, the more the urban garden will be rich, flowers, leaves, trees and so forth. And on the back of the bus stop, we visualized all these informations. So you can see this from a distance. But we also put a lot of sensors to monitor the traffic condition, the weather condition, the noise pollution, and so forth. And those elements destroy the messages. So basically, when I said we wanted to design an interactive bus stop as a social and urban landmark, in this case, you can see from above, from a distance, you can see basically the level of the quality of the life in this particular neighborhood. And the quality of life for us was given by how much people communicate together, so how much the local community exchange information with the environmental data. So this for us was at least the concept behind this interactive bus. And now we did this project like years ago, and I think now Paris is developing this very similar concept into the new town. Again, trying to create bus stop as a places where people can gather and enhance local conversations and communication. The last project where we did a lot of physical construction is about trade shows. And we started to work with an Italian company called PT Immagine, and they do a lot of fashion trade shows. And they're really, it's basically the most important trade shows worldwide that happen every beginning of January. And the question that they ask us is how can we rethink the entrance to the trade show? In 3 days in Florence, which is a very small city, you have 40,000 visitors that arrive, stay 3 days and leave. And they said, this is how you channel people is a non-nice experience. It's really like more like cows go summer instead of like these highly fashionable designers and sophisticated people entering. So they asked us how we can redesign the space. So we did a lot of studies, a lot of ethnographic studies and observation to trying to understand people and trying to understand how we can design technologies. And for us, the notion was to redesign the space with two different directions. One was the first concept that we had was we are going to design smart badges. Smart badges basically allow users to go around trade show to tag objects or things. So if you like Armani, if you like Prada, if you like this or that, you can just simply tag it. And secondly, you could tag people. So if you go and talk to a vendor, you can exchange business card with your augmented badge. And then we have an interactive kiosk. So when you exit the exhibition, you just tap your smart badge and we can print all the visits that you had, who you saw, the brands that you liked, and so forth. So it was a personalized visit and personalized experience. But we tried, and this was a very bad idea, actually, for many reasons. One is, for example, in this type of trade shows, it's very important the human contact. So we proposed what we call the virtual shake hand, which was a very bad idea because people need to touch, to tap on the shoulder and to have like a very personal contact. So the idea of exchanging business cards with a virtual badge was very bad. And secondly, people when they go to trade shows collect a lot of papers and business cards, and you take notes and you put papers in your left pocket, right pocket, on the back, and you bend it. So you make personal annotation, which was not possible here. So we create a second project where we utilize mobile phone and QR codes that basically enable user to tag physical space with QR codes. But also, so with your telephone, you know where you were going, the people you were visiting, you can download business cards for people, and so far. But also, you were able to leave voice annotation to the system. So it's a very basic system, but you can walk around and say, I like this product, I want to buy this, I want to buy that, I don't like this, and so far. So we create voice annotations on a physical space. And imagine people, design firms that travel from Japan to Florence. You can leave voice messages and your colleagues in Japan, they have immediately the same reaction and they can provide comments and so forth. So we deployed the system, we did a lot of tests, the experience of trade shows in Italy, and in this particular one. But if we go back for a moment to the design brief that the company gave us, was how can we redesign the access to the trade show? How can we imagine the access? So this for us is a way to redesign how you access to information with a mobile phone. And this is a very pragmatic tool. It's a very business-oriented tool, very functional, utilitarianistic. So this was very good for us. But we wanted also to explore different elements. So one way to access to the trade show was through a utilitaristic tool, like a mobile device for business. But we wanted to explore also the emotional dimension. So how we can create an emotional experience in the entrance of the trade show. And this is where we started to prototype what we have called a cloud, which is actually a very complex and sophisticated object. So it's a 3D freeform, which basically is a magic object where we wanted to explore interactivity with media and information. And we utilized fiber optics. Each fiber was like 1 pixel. And we have so an object with a 360-degree pixel. And you could show information there, and you could touch information as well. We had about 1,600 pixels, so 1,600 holes where we put manually fiber optics. We had about 80 kilometers of fiber optics, and this object was full of sensors. You have proximity sensors, so when you go close, the object can react, play sounds, change color, play music, talk to you. We have touch sensors. So depending when you touch the object, you could create different interactions. You had a video camera, so you could have gesture interaction, or the object could recognize the user. We had sound speakers, where basically you could have circular sound and so forth. And again, we wanted to explore a different way to show information. It's not a flat screen where you can simply project images. It's not a projector. It is, for us, was a way to explore new forms of screen, and in this case by fiber optics. Again, like a lot of researchers really worked on that, and it was very complex exercise to bring from a 2D shape to a 3D shape, to design a software to project the image 360 degrees. Then we have, again, exploring how you could play with the object. And then we basically had a projector inside. And actually one of the researchers that was working on the project, they spent like almost 2 months in Florence, and we had a very small hole in the cloud where they used to enter from the back of the cloud and manipulate the projector. And the researcher actually was staying in Florence for such a long time to discover a fantastic place where they have the best tiramisu. And at the end of the project, he could not enter in the cloud. So we're very worried about his physical condition. But at the end, we showed the project, and then the notion is that, again, this can give an emotional experience to the user when they enter the bridge. You can play games, you can listen to music, you can interact, you can touch sound, and so forth. So we wanted to merge a utilitaristic device like a mobile phone program to give access to information to a more emotional experience of entering and playing. And then we have tested, first time with kids. Of course, kids was immediately playing and so forth. Again, this was during the training. So this was our, in a way, concept and answer to the topic that we have been asked to address. So I'm going now to, I think I have 20 minutes. So I'm going to switch to show you some projects more related to mobile media. And actually the name mobile experience is, we started to work, I created the research lab when I was working with Motorola, so we're interested in mobile technologies, but also in Mobil. So we have these two. So mobile experience, just a few words on how the paradigm is shifting. So personal computer are mainly, first of all, to compute, so to calculate. In French, they say ordinateur, so to make order. So these are more like tools for productivity, which start to be less than it's true today. But ideally, you have a immersive interaction, first of all. So you're doing your computer immersed in that. Isolated interaction, and to work. It's basically like more main tool for work. Which again, now is less and less true, but if you compare to mobile technology, mobile media are more to communicate, which is different. Are personalized. If you look the way people personalize mobile phones, are emotional objects that you're really attached to. You have a peripheral interaction with that, which means you can be at the coffee and talk with people, and at the same time you send an SMS message to someone else. So you can have a peripheral interaction, totally immersive. So the paradigm is really going to shift in many different ways, and we explore different ways for us to, again, to imagine media technology. Writing is a project that we did back 2008 when a promise asked us how can we redesign the way institutions and citizens talk, in particular the younger generation with institutions. And the problem that they had at that time was how we can utilize in a new way media and technology to prevent driving under influence, so driving when you're drunk. The way the institution used to talk was to broadcast information from website or television, so top-down communication, and secondly, to have police cars in front of clubs. So when you exit, you have tests, and if you're drunk, they remove your car and they remove points from your driving license. So it was a very frontal way to deal. So what we started to explore here, and we have a scenario, was how we can use peer-to-peer communication in order to address or to rethink the problem. And the scenario here, basically, we show that we create an ecosystem, website, mobile phone, and a wearable device. The idea is that you log in into the website, you belong to your tribes, and use your social network. So it's not a Facebook app where you have hundreds of friends, but you create only a network of your close friends. Secondly, you see Marco, who is wearing a bracelet, and this bracelet is to test your level of alcohol. So in the case here, when you go out to a bar, you have your drinks, and then you have to blow into the bracelet. And we were very interested in exploring wearable device. How do you interact with the object? So you don't turn the bracelet on, off, but you carry the bracelet. Or we were very interested to explore like new communication, like tools like Zigbee and so on. So in this case, Mark will blow it. The system says you're drunk. I'm going to call one of your friends. So the bracelet automatically talks to your cell phone, and the cell phone starts to search to your network. And the network finds basically Francesca. Say, hey Francesca, Mark is drunk, please come and drive you home. But before doing that, the system asks, hey Francesca, can you blow into the bracelet? So we're sure that we don't have two drunk people in the same car driving home. But again, so a lot of testing from, how do you design the product, the object, the communication module. We explored Zigbee. So Zigbee embedded into SIM cards. So this is a very vertical research, very sophisticated. But then, of course, we tested the project with more than 100 users. So this was also a good way for my researcher to have like alcohol in the lab and have like official whiskey for the test. But the point here was really, at the end, was really, what we worked was not on the notion of the technology, because the notion is the technology is not powerful enough. But what we have been working was on the notion of trust. So, we know we don't need a technology to tell us if we are drunk and we cannot drive. But legally, we know that after 1 or 2 glasses of whiskey, we are not supposed to drive. But all the project at the end was how we can build a circle of trust among users in order to help them to coordinate and to resolve local problems. And driving under influence was one problem. Then the user, in this case, started to create other networks to resolve their own problem. For example, in Italy, during the month of August, this is when we take vacation, and cities tend to be empty. You have a lot of seniors that stays in cities, and for example, you need to, some who go and bring fresh milk from medicine to grandmother, or some who visit friends and so far. So really the group started to identify issues that were very different from the and then was images from this. Maybe don't have time to show really. I will discuss another project because we may work with the research lab of Cristobal on using Locust. What's called Locust is a an open source platform that we are using to prototype different projects. And the first one, not the first one of the projects that we are doing is with UNICEF in Brazil, where basically we are trying to understand how we can utilize mobile devices with teenagers in favelas in order to map their own environment and report those information to local governments. So basically, this is an old slide. We had about more than 100 users that has been trained to map. And and these are the topics that they started to map on the street. So they came up with problems that they see in their own neighborhood, and they start to organize the problems that they see. Environmental risk, stairs, transportation, landslides, and so forth. So this is all user-generated content and organized. And these are like screenshots from the platform. There is a video with some sound that explains the problem. Oops.
Here we're teaching 25 community leaders.
We invite for the workshop nevertheless NGOs, community leaders, and also local government, because we expect that this initiative to be implemented as a public policy.
In the next 6 months, we're going to map 5 different favelas, 5 different neighborhoods in Rio de Janeiro. This is because the satellite images that exist are old, they're not clear. Special UNICEF application which runs on a cell phone that allows young people to go into their communities, use the GPS on the phone, use the camera on the phone, and use the keyboard on the phone to log information about the environmental risks they see. This information can be directly uploaded to a map. This map can then become a reference point for the young people to show the government, to show UNICEF, to show the world what they're seeing right now in their community.
A história do Romano, a história das pipas, a história da coisa revolucionária, vamos assim, na comunidade.
For this first pilot initiative, we are removing environmental risk. However, the same platform can be used to map crime, can be used to map sanitation, any issue you want. UNICEF is just wanting to build the tools for the young people to use and the communities to use. What they decide is productive.
Vamos localizar algum problema, basta um pontinho vermelho no mapa. Imagina, todos os moradores da comunidade alertando o poder público para chamar a atenção da comunidade.
A comunidade tem muitos problemas de saúde ambiental. Entendeu? E com essa semana que eu aprendi as coisas aqui, nós podemos salvar vidas lá.
Eu acho que a questão do desenho, né,
innovative ways that we can bring the youth voice to the policymakers and duty bearers of their communities.
Portanto, dessa comunidade começou a ser meu programa.
This is one, basically we are developing all these open source tools, both web and mobile, working with local communities, and now we are expanding to 6 different favelas in Brazil. We are working with the IoT to map risk in different areas, so we're really trying to expand the tool and see how we can help local communities to improve the way they communicate with local authorities in order to report fast, and we start to see all the reports. But most importantly, only locals knows about local issues and local problems, and they communicate with local governments. And in this case, you go from a situation like that to, after the municipality intervene, they can fix spaces, or from dangerous spaces to resanitation interventions, or more like simply way how the community start to reorganize itself to redesign local piazza space, so you go from here to there, for example. So, and this is a very meaningful way for local community to use new media in a way, and to reinforce two ways communication. One is in peer-to-peer communication, so local communities started to talk and to have a view of their own environment, but also start in a vertical way to discuss with local authorities. And then we also use the platform for tourism and other experiments which I will not go through right now. Before, I think I have.
Local tourism.
I just want to show maybe a couple of quick also exercise that shows a different way that we have to explore ideas. This is what we call hackathon. So basically, the notion of hackathon is to have a quick exercise where we create small groups or community that hack and work on given problems. In this case, for us was a way to explore technologies and new way to interact with media and objects, for example. We have many different hackathons exercises that happen at MIT more. For example, when we had a storm in New York, I think in November, we made a Sandy hackathon where a lot of programmers from MIT create software and code to help local residents to find water, gas, resources. So basically, people and students and researchers working together in a very compact period of time and creating knowledge. For us, in this case, was how we can rethink think to the notion of the Internet of Things, that each object can communicate with other objects. So in this case, my team wanted to explore a chopping board. So where you use it for cooking. And the idea, if you have an iPad that can tell you the recipes to make great pasta, but then if you cut tomatoes and onions, you cannot interact with an iPad. So in this case, what they did is they hacked a chopping board, so a common object, and the chopping board became the interactive device to communicate with the smart tablet. So you interact through the chopping board, but you explore information on the iPad or tablet. Again, and this was like a quick exercise where they add a chopping board that can basically educate and tell you how to make a good receipt. They give you the size of onions, tomatoes, and the quantities. But then, as you will see, when you click on the board, you can interact with information and exchange information. Again, very quick exercise, but the point here is that we are exploring new ways to interact and to create interaction between objects and devices, and in this case, again, a And these are like very simple prototypes that we can build in a space like of a weekend, 2 days, but they're important for the team to explore new ideas, to learn about technologies, and to create potential projects. And you see it here. Another similar project, financial toys. Again, we wanted to explore how do you educate kids, for example, to spend money. So in this case, we created like emotional object, like a piggy toy, and then this object can interact with the tablet. So you can create an application where you don't interact with your hands, but you have a third object that is the object that interacts with the application. And the same object can be utilized as a payment device. So you can pay things through NFC or similar technologies. And we explore interaction where instead of pressing button, you have the turns, object or buttons, and so on. So again, these are like quick exercise and quick prototype that we build in a space of like 2 days, which is very different from the connected home, which we built like in 2 years. But these are helpful for us to think through projects and think through interactions and help the team to brainstorm on it. And I think that I will actually stop here. I wanted to, before stopping, of course, I want to thank all the team and researchers lined up there, the one who made all these great projects. So these are the guys that do the project. And you can see a lot of the information on the website if you're interested. I think the videos and the material is there if you're interested. Thanks for your attention. I think we have time for questions if you want. Thanks. We used to think that the third world, for example, is Brazil or is the developing world, but actually Brazil is more developed than the developing world right now. So personally, I would say no. The project that we are doing with the developing world, like Brazil or Haiti, these are the projects that we do with UNICEF. We haven't done that. There are a lot of organizations within MIT that do a lot of projects in Africa or emerging countries that are also very interesting. Personally, within my lab, we're not working.
Hi, my question is, what do you think about copyrights? Do they hinder or do they support creativity?
About what?
About copyrights.
Copyright.
Yes.
How much time we have? No, I mean, copyrights are like, I don't know how this can support creativity. It is a double fold. So all what we do, conventionally, we're trying to use, or to create and develop open source software. So everything that we do, we're trying to push open source as educational institution. But copyrights or being able to recognize authors that are the owner of the ideas and the thinkers, this is crucial and critical. So there is this kind of schizophrenic approach. From one side, that these are very important, you need to protect. But on the other side, the more you're open, the more you can create collective intelligence and energies that can help processes and ideas to circulate. So we are in this kind of space.
Does MIT some kind of program to analyze
private ideas? Well, MIT, one of the issues at MIT is a lot of students create startups even before finishing the study. So the idea that MIT, there is a lot of movement for students to create private companies. MIT helps spin-off a lot of those ideas, so MIT support and help. But what is also very interesting for me is that a lot of the projects are made sponsored by private companies. So for example, this was very different from when I used to work in Paris or Italy, where university and private company were basically two very separate worlds. Now, at least in MIT, there is a lot of synergy there. And even the MIT campus, you have students and research lab and classrooms, but then you have startups, and then you have companies. So there is a lot of integration. There's really everything happening. And there are a lot of interesting programs to accelerate innovation. There are like the 100K competition, where MIT gives funds to students to sponsor ideas and so forth. So there is a lot of activity in this area.
Hi, Federico. This is Carla. Congratulations, first of all. It's very interesting. All you showed and everything is very nice. I would like to ask you if you have considered to put this community interchange with teammates. We are very sophisticated. We are very fond of technology as people and as a country. So have you considered to make experience with it in Brazil? The same here in Chile? It would be nice to do so. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, I would love to. This is actually one of the conversations that we have to get started and to see how we can create synergies. When we develop locus, what we have done in Brazil, we have done a similar project, for example, for memories of immigrants. So we have collected a lot of local histories and memories and created guides based on memory. We do it for tourism, where we use user-generated stories for tourism. We do for urban planning to involve community. Joint program with MIT, where students can come here and learn from Chile and vice versa, and we can design some technology. So hopefully, yes. In 1 year, hopefully we will do something together and we'll go to that.
Hi, my name is Juliana. I'm working in a company that works with GIS, the Graphic Information System. And something that I noticed with my experience, you have one kind of information that is the information that people in Brazil have with their phones. But you can merge various like sensors to plug that. And what think people with the social networks. So I think that maybe it's
Step with UNICEF right now is to create a critical index, because we have so many information, and what is critical is how to prioritize information. So this is definitely something that we are thinking. We started to imagine different interfaces. So we've done a project in Porto Alegre, Brazil, on civic journalism. And basically, the way we prioritize reports from street journalists was through different colors of the board of the frame of the videos. Very simple, but if it is red, it's urgent, blue is, no. But again, we are exploring this way. And the second question around other layers of information, that's totally true. And this is why, for example, we use this locus is a totally open source program where you can build application based on. So if you need to integrate information generated by Twitter or Facebook or open data from the municipality about street crimes or stuff like that, you can definitely work. So this is definitely very important.
Hello, Federico. My name is Ignacio. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you about, I know you talked about it a little before, is the resources you use to make your projects, because you were saying that at MIT you have a lot of private fundings, but in Chile, and that's not something that happens a lot. Mostly investigation comes from resources from the government or from the university. From your experience in different universities in the world, what would you recommend to a country or a university like this one to promote investigation and projects like the ones in China? Should we get closer to private institutions, or should we ask for more money to the government?
Well, again, this is like a very interesting question. The American system is very much based on private, but also NSF grants. So MIT works a lot with national foundations or other type of foundation grants. The projects that I mentioned are made in collaboration with companies, but most importantly are made by students. So basically, MIT, like every American university, the costs are very high for students. They have to pay high costs, but then the students, they do projects. So what is important in my view is that students are able to be part of the project, take ownership of the project. So, and then students are able to create many interesting and very sophisticated projects with us. And for example, we had also another discussion with in Russia, where private companies start to build research lab in universities. But the point is that if the private company put a lot of money, it's not enough to create good research. A lot of money, in a way, can take away motivation on one side, and also can drive too much to research. So the boundary between freedom of research and perspective from the university is very important. And but definitely, in every step, we need to have some support to make those projects.
My name is Federico. I wanted to ask you about the design process in projects like the bus stop or the house. Did you include final users or in your design process, or all the ideas come from the team? How is that?
So in our lab, we do a lot of different. We use a lot of different methodologies. The latest project, like the chopping board, the bank financial. So in some project, the team says, I have an idea, I see the future, and they build it. I don't care about the user. I just in other projects, like for example for the house, we did a lot of ethnographic studies. For example, to build a window, trying to understand the notion of privacy, the notion of window, which is both, how, like in Italy, family stays on the window, they communicate, they talk. This is where the cultural transmission happens. So if you build a robotic window, they turn off and close the window. So we explore this notion, or the notion of, in Japan, they use this term engawa, which is the space in between, is the frontier between the inside of the house, which is the private space, and the outside of the world. So it's the space in between. So we did a lot of ethnographic studies to understand local culture and stuff. So we use very different approaches depending on the project. But we come really from a tradition of observing users and trying to understand users, because my basic training as social scientist in Paris, where, for example, my initial studies, I spent like a month in living with people in their house, trying to understand the user behavior so far. So for my PhD, I lived 3 months in houses with senior citizens to understand how they live. So again, we have a different approach.
I'm going to look at what happens to one of your innovations when it becomes no longer a novelty. For example, in the Laboratorio, when the young people with enthusiasm, with the hope for a big change that will happen, encounters the administration which does not have the capacity to respond to all these areas. And then you intervene with a system that determines which are the hotspots, so that again the young person is removed from this and becomes an institution. How do you prevent that from happening?
Well, this is again a very important point. We haven't had yet with that. But for example, what we can observe from what is happening right now in the different favelas is that communities start to deal with the problem in a different way. So they start to realize that they have some tools that they can utilize and they have some income. Then if you remove the tools, at least we have to hope that at least they know how they have been dealing with the process and they can apply the same process with different tools, even like the kite with the cameras, they have dealt with it, they build it. So we haven't simply injected a technology, but local community they have built in. But this is like probably like simple process.
Federico, question on this side. Along the lines of what Daniel was thinking and talking about focusing on experience, how do you see the trend going forward in the area of design technology? More focused on designing, so to speak, better things, or towards making things better? Because I think we have been surrounded by full technologies, gadgets, and I think the world is getting right technologies everywhere, pervasive computing, zero Internet of Things. So basically we are in this world of technology, but I think critical to also don't forget experience and also how companies or universities in your case move along this corridor, whether designing better things or making things better and solving issues. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, when we built the bus stop, for example, was in 2006, was for us a huge project. We built all the electronic boards, the software, the application, the interface. Today, to rebuild the same object, like very young undergraduates can do it today, technically, because like the way like Arduino boards, open source, fabrication labs, all those things are really spreading and becoming more approachable by users that they don't have a super high skills or sophisticated computation skills. So the idea is you have a little bit more the opportunity to make things better or design better things for you. I had two slides, for example, on the fabrication lab, which is this, I know you mentioned there is one in Santiago for the digital maker, there are many fabrication labs, where basically people and communities start to build objects that are not mass produced, but it's a small production of object that really fits user needs. So user can bring and send more inputs to the object that they design. So definitely this is probably very interesting and large science. So very small production of highly customized objects from furniture to mobile phones I had two slides, for example, in MIT, one of the students designed mobile phones made out of wood. Okay? Made out of wood. $150, you can download the file from the internet, you go to the fabrication lab here in Santiago and you can build it yourself. And you can write your name and picture on the skin of it. And this is made out of wood, $150. It's basically for everyone. And so there is all this movement that like furniture, customizable furniture. So all this, and how people is using technologies to build objects and technologies that fit their own needs and improve the experience.
Hello, my name is Federico. I'm from, I live at a startup which tries to make sport technologies more easier
To use?
Yeah, no, easier to use and more reachable for sport. I feel I have a great team, but as we're growing, I have this great fear that men are very plural from very different professions, from areas of study. It might become harder to communicate each other. How do you manage to have so many different professionals in one room and being able to communicate?
So a lot of aspirants that give headache, basically. Because like, it's true when you say a design, for an interaction designer, from an architect, from a software engineer or a mechanical engineer, they all say design, they mean very different things. So even like the word that we commonly think we use are very different. In the way we do it, or the way it happens is that basically we have a common objective. And once that you agree on the common objective, there is kind of self-organization of the group that struggle and get it. So common objective, a common vision, and then the group start to, and also be aware that you can have and partner with folks that are not in the same team, or they have not the same knowledge and skills that you. So this is really it. And then the third is we have somehow a way to establish leadership. So when you do, let's say, ethnographic studies to imagine how to design an application, then you have more like interaction designer, ethnographer that take the lead. But then at one point you have like software engineers that have to come into it. But it's very complex. It's not a result. It's still an open question. It's not a result.
Hello. Hello, Federico. By the way, the financial application you showed in the last, what stage is this? It's a project right now. It's a spin-off, using in some place. I ask you because the mobile payment system is not a standard in worldwide. Have good solutions in Africa, in Latin America. Have the bankarization is less than the other places. So, what are you doing for in this area?
Well, this is we work a lot with banks. In 2008, we designed all the roadmap for Nokia for the NFC phones and payments. So this is one of the few cases where the technology is ready, near-field communication is ready, it's effective, it's secure, but it's difficult to take. So the financial application for us was an exploration of new way to interact with objects and with the AI. So when we go from these prototypes that work, when we need to bring this into a product, then this is a different game because we need to compete with local regulation rules and so forth. So somehow we step out, and either there is a startup who can do it, or as a university it doesn't make sense. For example, now we work with a telecom in Turkey, and we have created applications or idea about music. So they like very much, they want to use it, but then they have to deal with all the Turkish regulation on copyright, music, and so forth. So we can't deal with that. So there is a local company who is taking care.
Okay, so thank you very much, Federico and Daniel, for this.